Well, I and the rest of the Liberal Democrat delegation will be voting against the agreement in Parliament here because we feel that it's not a good agreement for the UK and it's not good for the European Union. There are too many open questions about environmental standards, workers' rights, the situation of the European citizens in the UK, and it's something I joined politics to campaign against. It's what brought me here. I couldn't vote for it.
You were the overwhelming favourite for Gibraltarians in the EU elections. What's it been like representing the Rock?
It's been a huge privilege. It's been a privilege to represent the Southwest. It's been a huge privilege to represent Gibraltar. I'll be quite honest, I wasn't very familiar with Gibraltar before I was elected. I hadn't ever visited. I've had 2 great visits to the Rock and people have been so welcoming. I've really enjoyed my time there and learning about the issues that Gibraltar faces. It is one of my real concerns going forward that I don't think Gibraltar will be a priority for the British government, and I worry that, you know, we might end up with Boris Johnson might choose to diverge quite a long way from European Union rules and regulations. He's got that choice. He's got a big majority, so he could choose to remain very closely aligned with the EU, or he could choose to diverge. And if he does, then we're looking at a difficult trading arrangements with tariffs and quotas, and where that leaves Gibraltar is, you know, it's still very much unknown, and I think that's a worry.
Anne Widdecombe, it's the eve of Brexit. Any regrets at all?
None at all. This is the right thing. It's the right thing for Britain. It's the right thing for Gibraltar. It's the right thing for everybody.
There must be some sadness. Any concerns at all about the next stage of the negotiations?
Oh, I've certainly got concerns because I don't think Boris is anything like as tough as he likes to sound. I'm worried about fishing. I'm worried about defence. All manner of things like that. But nevertheless, you know, this is the first big important step, and on Saturday, Britain will wake up to its first day as a free nation for more than 40 years.
Well, it's a very sad time. I mean, I was elected in May for 5 years. There's all sorts of things I want to do here to do with sustainable finance and climate change and all sorts of problems that need sorting out that the European Union is sorting out, and now British MEPs won't be a part of it. So that just makes me really sad, and it seems crazy to throw away that power that we could be using to make things better.
You've always been a big supporter of Gibraltar. What do you think are the main challenges going forward now?
I think it is going to be difficult for Gibraltar because now Spain, that has, you know, created problems for Gibraltar, is still in the European Union and still has power here, and Britain will be leaving and won't have power inside these institutions. So, I mean, I'm sure the British government is committed to continuing to support Gibraltar, but it won't have the same status in negotiations, and that does leave the people of Gibraltar quite vulnerable, I'm afraid.
No, I think Gibraltar set an example to us all. When I was out in Gibraltar, Gibraltar had voted to remain. It didn't want to leave at all. It foresaw all manner of difficulties, and they just said, and this is what we're doing about this, and this is the contingency we've made for that. And they had a can-do attitude, about which I wrote when I came back to Britain, wrote in my Express column, just saying, I wish our government had a quarter of as much can-do as that. I've huge confidence in Gibraltar because it's got confidence in itself.
And do you think the UK will stick by Gibraltar in these negotiations?
I sincerely hope the UK will always stand by Gibraltar. Gibraltar is British. I've got enormous personal connections with it. My brother was born out there because my parents were stationed there. The other brother, the stillborn brother, is buried out there. And I feel an enormous connection with Gibraltar. And if I can't imagine Britain would ever betray Gibraltar.
And Spain kind of holds the cards. We won't be in the European Union, Spain is, and Spain will have a veto as a member state of the European Union. So, you know, it's going to be a very delicate negotiation, and I hope that, I think there are officials in London who care and who know and who understand the issues. I hope they will be heard, and I hope there will be some, you know, proper, sensible, sound negotiation between Britain and the rest of the EU, including Spain.
Do you not think that the government, the UK government's hand is strengthened? It's got a strong mandate from the UK public to going into these negotiations?
I don't think it does have a strong mandate. It didn't even win 50% of the popular vote. 52, I can't remember if it's 52 or 54% of the British public did not vote for the Tory party or the Brexit party. So, they got in with a system that allowed them to win this massive majority. And I honestly don't believe that the majority of the British people are behind it. And, that just sounds like, oh, I'm a Lib Dem and I'm whinging and whining because we didn't do very well in the election. But actually, I think there's something fundamental here. And I think, I know that there are a lot of people in a lot of parts of politics, civic society, who are now looking at this really seriously and saying, how do we resolve this? Because, ultimately, it needs to be sorted out.
A quick thought on the Liberal Democrats regrouping at the moment after a battering at the last election. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my overriding thought is that we have an electoral system in the UK which is not democratic. And Boris Johnson won a huge majority with a 1% increase in the vote, and that's just not right. And our vote went up by 4.2%, we lost a seat. Nearly 1 million people voted for the Greens, they got 1 MP. It's unfair across the board, and I think that nothing will really be resolved in the UK until we have a fair voting system. And I think for me, that's my battle now. I think it's bigger than any party. It's bigger than the Lib Dems. It's bigger than the Labour Party. It's a fundamental overhaul of our electoral system that we need, so that people feel represented, and people feel enfranchised, and people feel that they have a government that represents them. And I think that this whole question goes back to a feeling of disenfranchisement, and Westminster doesn't care about us. So we'll stick 2 fingers up to Westminster in a referendum, and look where we are. I mean, what a mess, what a disaster. This should never have happened.
What about for the environment? What does Brexit mean for the environment?
Well, we've already seen that while the British government says certain things on protecting environmental standards, it's watering down the sort of independent enforcement of those laws. So as members of the European Union, we can have the laws enforced by going to the European Court of Justice. And we've argued as Greens that we should have an independent court in Britain to enforce the laws. But the government has created a very weak body, and the members of that body will effectively be appointed by the government. So there's no real independent enforcement at all. And when you see some of the people that were driving Brexit were very keen to reduce environmental standards, criticise what they'd call red tape, keeping our air clean, our water clean and so on, it does make you quite nervous for the future of environmental standards.
So what next for you now, Molly?
Arrest. I've been fighting Brexit as hard as I could, right down to the 13th of December, when it became obvious that we couldn't stop it. And, it's been full on for 4 years. I do need to have a rest and some time to reflect. It's really frustrating for me that in the middle of this climate emergency, I as a Green am losing power, but I'm hoping I'll still find something useful to do after I've had a time to have a breather.
Extinction Rebellion, more demonstrations?
Well, I mean, I've always done that, and I'm sure I'll continue to do that. But the great thing about being a Green politician who's elected to a powerful position is that you can actually yourself make the changes that we need to see. And it seems to me that we need more Green politicians now. It's fine to have Extinction Rebellion there, but they need Greens inside the institutions making those changes. And that's why it seems just the wrong time to be losing 7 Green MEPs from the European Parliament.
And is this the end of your political career?
Well, I've said that before. So it's probably a question of never say never again, but I do hope so.
So what will you be doing on Friday night, Saturday morning?
I shall be returning to the noiseless tenor of my ways, and I shall be resuming my writing and my television work, and indeed I'm making a television documentary next week. So I should just be picking up the threads of what I had to drop when I decided to try and get Brexit done.
What's going to happen to the Brexit Party?
The Brexit Party will be much needed during the trade negotiations, so we're certainly not going to go anywhere. After that, we'll see.
Caroline, what about you personally? Where to now?
I don't know. I really don't know. I'm going to have a bit of a rest in February. This whole process has been really exhausting. And think about where to go next. I don't know.